To the person to whom some of these ideas are new, it might be rather difficult to see this idea of interconnection, and particularly the sort of vast scale of it. But as we're able to kind of quiet ourselves and to come in touch with this, we become aware that there is such a thing as a cosmic code, a grand scheme of interrelationships that really is endless. Everywhere we look, we see these sorts of patterns. The chambered Nautilus shell is an example, the golden mean. Leonardo da Vinci did the diagram of man as the five-pointed star, for instance. Everywhere we look, we see correspondences that link with processes in nature. It's just a matter of keeping our eyes open and trying to focus our awareness.
In modern metaphysics, we use the term sacred geometry to refer to the geometric forms that have particular aspects of spiritual power or spiritual significance. They can hold embedded information. Now, to understand what sacred geometry really is, we have to go back to the source. Sacred geometry is really the thought forms from the mind of God being expressed in a particular pattern. We see that pattern as a particular geometric form. Now, we can also look at these thought forms from the mind of God expressed as a blueprint of sacred geometry, as being the patterns of all creation. Everything that exists in the manifest plane has to take on a form. The form that it takes on has got to be something that allows a state of consciousness and energy to operate within that form. So it's these thought forms from the mind of God that create all the blueprints of creation. Now, another way that human beings access these geometric forms, other than through study and observation of the natural world, is through direct perception at a spiritual level, sometimes in visions or in dreams. And then we can say that this sacred geometry pattern language is in fact a type of angelic language. Sacred geometry and this pure geometric language is something that can be used to communicate with higher non-physical beings, and that higher non-physical beings use to communicate between themselves, because it is actually the patterns that have been used by the higher beings to create everything here on the crystallized physical plane.
Geometry and number and ratio, these are not random. Everything in geometry is an intelligence. For instance, right angle, a 90-degree angle in a form, that 90-degree angle is not just an angle, it's the manifestation of a type of intelligence. Everything that you look at in a room, if I were to touch a surface, and let's say it's a rough surface, I'm experiencing a type of intelligence that's based on roughness, you see. A way of understanding intelligence is this: intelligence is evident in anything that is attributable. Anything that is attributable. Anything that has attribute is a manifestation of intelligence.
When these thought forms from the mind of God, this pattern language of sacred geometry, manifest into the world, one of the purest forms that it takes is in the realm of minerals and crystals. Every major spiritual tradition on the planet has had spiritual and healing applications of particular crystals and gemstones. Within the crystal or gemstone, you can see a very specific sacred geometric form that is related through what's known as the law of signatures to the power or potential application of that particular stone. So when we talk about the science of vibration can express itself through color or through sound, but it also expresses through shape. So shape is one method to have divine forces express themselves in the phenomenal world, and it's in the crystalline realm that we get the purest expression of those pure shapes. You don't see a pure cube or a pure octahedron or things of that kind in the human body, but you do see it in the crystal realm. Then from their appearance in the mineral realm, they will take on more living, organic, complex forms within living beings like the human being.
Let's put it like this. When we talk about archetypes and divine patterns, they are laid out in the perception of the higher deities in geometrical form. So there is an exact type of relationship between all parts which is best described in geometry. And because these purposeful patterns are the ones after which we must pattern ourselves, they are called sacred because they present the good. The good is a sacred geometrical pattern which must be achieved in the lower world of becoming and conditioning. It is sacred because it restores us. When we can get the right geometry in our lives here below, it restores us to the heavenly, joyful, blissful worlds. And whatever takes us into joy and bliss, man calls sacred. In other words, to make whole, to make sacred, to make of one piece, to be restored to purpose. So one day, our geometry below will reflect the geometry above. Now, Master DK said something very interesting. Very interesting. After every life, the entire life is epitomized as a geometrical figure. And the figures are ugly in the beginning and ill-shaped, and they do not carry any beauty. They just reflect in geometry what the person has done. But as they go on and on and on, forms of ever purer beauty and connection are created, and these forms one day gel completely with the pattern in the heavens. Now, the great planet Uranus, the archetypal planet, represents the patterns in the heavens. And when that gelling takes place, we know our life is sacred because we know we are the great beings above. Our identity changes. We're no longer stuck down here below. We become the great beings who are expressing themselves through a divine geometry, which is purpose.
One of the most fascinating things for me in my study of sacred geometry has been to do a one-to-one analysis between the knowledge that was held and taught within the ancient spiritual traditions and the modern rediscovery of that knowledge in current science and technology. And so you'll find that many of the patterns that were used in the ancient spiritual traditions were empirically rediscovered in modern physics, chemistry, and biology. In fact, you can find textbooks by people like Linus Pauling on chemistry that will give you the actual physical structure of the chemical compounds, and it's like looking through a book of the teachings of the Pythagorean school of Greece. The knowledge of these sacred geometric patterns was known in the ancient world, and now is being empirically rediscovered. But the problem is that today there is no understanding in the scientific realm of what the deeper esoteric significance and power is of these patterns that are being found in physics and chemistry, for example. And it's very important to know that so that we use these forces properly and don't misuse them with sometimes catastrophic consequences.
If we look at things, for instance, like the golden mean in mathematics, and we see the amazing mathematical predictability of how things manifest in nature with the golden mean as a mathematical underpinning, we see a profound type of intelligence manifesting. Intelligence is just everywhere. There's nothing in the world that is unintelligent.
Every major spiritual tradition on the planet has taught its own initiates about the sacred geometric patterns which are the thought forms in the mind of God. They are an active link for us back to the creative source. Not only can they be applied for practical purposes, for healing, or for structuring the physical world around us to create harmony and balance, they can also be used in higher spiritual practices where the actual geometric form is dissolved in the mind, and what one then comes into direct contact with is the source itself, the original thought form in the mind of God that later crystallized that pattern. And so working with the cosmic codes is a master method of higher spiritual development used by virtually every spiritual tradition.